Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. For more than 150 years, ours has been a congregation of open minds and loving hearts, celebrating many sources of wisdom and many spiritual paths. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, your hopes for our world, and your story are welcome here. And our doors are closed because our hearts are open, living our values of care and compassion. You can stay connected online through Sunday coffee hour and small groups. If you're a newcomer, you can visit our website for a visitor form so you can find out more about our congregation, how to get connected, newcomer classes, or you can always contact our staff or our office to get connected as well. And each Sunday, you can join us for services online, of course, and there are Spirit Kit family kits, themed activities for children to bring home. Please contact the office for more information. And a special thank you to our guest musician today, Matt Gender, for sharing your gifts of music. Thank you for joining us. And today's offering goes to support our church mission, including half for the Human Needs Fund, offering financial assistance to members and friends. And you can see in your e-news and join us this Wednesday night for a special forum to learn about a class that we're holding for the month of February, the Transforming Hearts Collective, a course designed for education, reflection, and transformation of individuals and congregations in our effort to be a place of inclusion and justice and equity, especially for trans people. This is a program from the UUA, our national association, and we'll have online videos available and opportunities for small group discussion. Registration will give you access to these, and you can see your e-news for more information or contact the office to register. So join us this Wednesday if you'd like to find out more. 6:30 Wednesday night online through Zoom, and then the class will take place this month. And today's service begins that conversation with spiritual reflection and poetry, and we hope you continue the conversation with us in the coming weeks. Finally, in the words of the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, minister of this church in the 1870s, may our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together.
This is the Unitarian Universalist Church. This is the Church of the Flaming Chalice. This is the Church of the Open Mind. This is the Church of the Loving Heart, where friends come together and share.
When I was a young teenager, I decided to ask my father about his life, post-high school and pre-marriage to my mom. I knew my mom's story and how my dad had gotten from San Francisco to upstate New York after his mother had died. But those years between high school graduation and their marriage were a mystery, other than they took place in Brooklyn and included a lot of Dodger games at Ebbets Field. We sat down and he related to me his difficulty in finding a job. Since this was the tail end of the Depression, I wasn't surprised, but one thing did catch my attention. He told me of the continuing discrimination toward Irish Catholics, even from Catholics of other ethnicities. These were the lingering remnants of the no Irish need apply rules. Now I was confused. I said to him, "But you weren't a practicing Catholic anymore. and Alan is a Swedish name, not an Irish one. How could anyone even know you were Irish Catholic? Then he said to me something that has stayed with me for more than 50 years. He said, I would never work for anyone who would refuse to hire me if they knew who I was. So yes, my dad could have passed, but he wouldn't. It was the 1960s, and this was my first realization that there could be discrimination beyond the color and gender barriers that he'd already taught me to resist. As I've moved through my life, I've tried to challenge exclusivity in its myriad forms and appearances. My preconceived notions of who belongs or who should be heard have gotten in the way, to be sure. I'm certainly a product of my time, place, and privilege, like many others. Yet I try to call myself on these assumptions whenever I become aware of them. One of the many things I appreciate about First UU is the congregation's willingness and eagerness to expand boundaries and live lives of compassion, to reach out and support others, and to right injustices. The understanding that our liberation is bound up in everyone's liberation is one facet of this. We do not live our lives in isolation, and we yearn to keep our hearts and minds open to the Spirit, so as to exist in a different and better way for everyone's benefit. To quote the poet Mark Nepo, we cannot eliminate hunger, but we can feed each other. We cannot eliminate loneliness, but we can hold each other. We cannot eliminate pain, but we can live a life of compassion. Ultimately, we are small living things awakened in the stream, not gods who carve out rivers. Like human fish, we are asked to experience meaning in the life that moves through the gill of our hearts. I want to imagine a world where people don't have to pass to be included fully, but are accepted fully for their true and complete selves.
This month, we've been talking a whole lot about imagination. So I want you to imagine for a moment not being able to be who you really are. For some of us, that's more of a reality than anything imagined. But just take a second to imagine, what if I could be exactly who I want to be all of the time? It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity, written by Teresa Thorne, illustrated by Noah Grigney. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy, until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Girl is Ruthie's gender identity. This is Ruthie's brother, Xavier. Xavier is a cisgender boy. That means when Xavier was born, everyone thought he was a boy, and as he grew older, it turned out that everyone was right. He is a boy. Boy is Xavier's gender identity. There are so many different ways to be a boy or a girl, too many to even fit in a book. But not everyone feels like either a boy or a girl. Non-binary is a helpful word that can describe a kid who doesn't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. This is Ruthie's friend Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl. But Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity. This is Alex's friend JJ. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Ever since JJ was very little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like themselves. This is JJ's gender identity. Alex and JJ are both non-binary. Just like there are many different ways to be a boy or a girl, there are many different ways to be non-binary too. Too many to fit in a book. Some kids don't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. They feel neither. Some kids feel that their gender identity isn't always the same. It's often changing. And even with all these possible ways to be, some kids don't feel any of the words they know fit them exactly right. There are a never-ending number of ways to be yourself in the world. Whether you feel like a boy, a girl, both, or neither, or describe yourself as another way, that is your gender identity. Your gender identity might match what people thought you were when you were born, or it might not. See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when they're born can be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always. When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents. Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. They just didn't know it at first. When people guess right, it's also okay to let them know. Xavier was 3.5 when he told his family, "I'm a boy. I like being a boy." You might feel like a boy or you might feel like a girl. You might feel like both or neither. You might feel like your gender changes from day to day or from year to year. You might feel that none of these words describes you perfectly. You might not be sure yet. Maybe you're still figuring it out. Your feelings about your gender are real. Listen to your heart. No matter what your gender identity is, you are okay exactly the way you are. You are loved. And it feels so good to be yourself, doesn't it? No matter your gender identity or which pronoun you use, we all look forward to a time when we're not put into a box that somebody else prescribed for us, when we're able to just be ourselves and express ourselves in a way that we want to, not how some others see us, because it feels so good to be exactly who you are.
Good morning. It is good to be with you. We are still physically separated, but are seeing a light in the future as we look forward to being together again. For now, we continue to gather in this virtual way as we create a place of communal caring and connection. Be enriched by the virtual presence of each other and draw yourself closer into the heart of love in this time of service and reflection. In this time together, we ask that our minds be open, our hearts welcoming, and our arms embracing. Here, we honor all who support us in this caring, loving, and all-inclusive ministry. We send gratitude to Phyllis Beery, serving as our caring coordinator for the last week, arranging care for our members and friends in need. Joe Payne will take over tomorrow for the next two, and we thank her for that. The members of our caring committee are wonderful examples of our compassionate community, holding us up as we go through challenging and happy times. And during this time of increasing needs in our lives and community, we encourage you to reach out for support and help if you are experiencing hardship. Many of us may need additional care, whether it be personal, pastoral care, grocery delivery, or an errand run, and we encourage you to reach out to Reverend Luke or myself with that request. We thank all of you who have served our congregation, helping others over the last few months. In this community, we make time each week to share pieces of our lives with one another. We do this because each person here has value. Each person's experience matters. We lift up those whose lives are touched by sadness, by illness, by worry, or by loneliness. We revel in those who are celebrating joys in their lives. May their happiness lift us all. May all of us find comfort, hope, joy, and healing strength in this community. Please hold Debbie Neville and her family in your thoughts. As I shared last week, her sister Judith Keene was nearing the end of life, and at age 76 passed away on Monday, January 25th, after a 2-year battle with cancer. We hold this family tight in our hearts with yet another loss and hope for healing, calm days ahead. And we hold Angie Joyce and her family in our hearts with the news of the passing of her father, Danny Joyce, age 88. He passed away at Orchard Manor in Lancaster, Wisconsin on Monday, January 25th. Danny had been in hospice care since summer, but Angie knew he wanted to wait to see if the Packers would make the Super Bowl. After he found that out, he decided to make a quiet exit. And for all of you who know Angie, you'll understand that humor. The family is glad that he is no longer suffering and grateful for the time they were able to spend with him before his passing. We send strength and love to Angie and Kim and the entire family during these tender days. In this new year, we continue to focus on reaching out to all of those around us to let them know we are still here and still holding and supporting them as we continue to face challenges in our community and country. Cards and phone calls can help to lift those that you love, and we encourage you to support local businesses in our community as they safely reopen. May the faith in the spirit of life, love for the community of earth, and love for the light in each other be ours now and in all the days to come.
Breathe deep the breath of life. Sit deeply in this time of grace and hope. May you find in this community, scattered though we are, strength and resilience and possibility. Feel below you the earth with its ancient turning, and above you the sky and the stars shining with ancient light, holding you in this moment, this breath, right now. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing silence together. Spirit of life and source of love, God of 1,000 names and beyond all naming, may our hearts and minds move beyond the conventional boundaries the world creates. In this world of possibility, may we be more and more open to expansive understandings of our humanity, others and our own, wide open to understandings of spirituality and religion and identity, of how we can create community that is more focused on seats at the table instead of more walls at our borders, likewise, more space in our hearts and less rigid borders of the heart. Beyond the rigidity that creates definitions that are locked tight, limiting who we feel free to be. May we explore ever wider where love is always calling us. May we recall in our very bones the breaking free of limitations toward our fullest common humanity. And we hold in those hearts these days those who suffer in mind, in body, or spirit. I invite you to bring to mind those you're holding in your own heart this day, in joy or in sorrow, celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all those names spoken, unspoken, may we be forever grateful for the fabric of love and of life that weaves us together. May those threads hold us in love and strength. These words of meditation come from the Reverend Teresa Soto, writing in honor of the Trans Day of Visibility. They write, "Dear trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender-expansive friends and kin, and those of us whose gender is survival. Let me explain," they write. "No, there is too much, so let me sum up. You are not hard to love and respect. Your existence is a blessing. Your pronouns are not a burden or a trial. They are part of your name, just shorter. Someone getting them wrong is not a poor reflection of you. It is not your fault. Your body really and truly belongs to you, no one else. The stories of your body, the names of your body's parts, your body's privacy, the sum of your body's glory. It's not okay for anyone to press their story of you back to the beginning of our liberation. We will find the people ready to be on the freedom for the way people are. We will go on. No one can rename you. It can't stick. As you offered the gift of being and saying who you are. Mostly, though, your stories belong to you. Your joy and complexity are beautiful, however you may choose to tell it or not tell it. Some folks, cis, may take their liberty for an unholy license. You are beloved. Please keep to our shared tasks of healing and getting free. Amen.
is an excerpt from God is No Noun by Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout. God is no noun, and certainly not an adjective. God is at least a verb, and even that shrinks her. God is not so much a woman as she resides in the improbable hope of brown mothers. God is not so much a man as he is at work in the memory of my grandfather's laugh. God swims in the tears of the one who sees her real self at long last in the bathroom mirror. God is not black, neither is he white. God is waiting in the contradiction of songs from slave shacks. And I have seen God in the alabaster smiles of children at play. We're getting Michelangelo all wrong. God is not the bearded one surrounded by angels floating over the Sistine. He is not Adam with his muscled back pressing the earth. No. God is the closing inch of space between their reaching fingers. Don't believe for a moment that God is Catholic. For God's sake, he isn't even human. Have you heard the wood thrush when the sun glistens the Huron? Can you see the flowers, how they speak to bees without a word? Still, God is no spring blossom, no wood thrush. God is neither the sun nor the bee. God is what you see in the blossom. God is when you hear the river and suddenly discover how much of it is part of you. To be clear, God is not you. God is somewhere in the 14 billion years which have come to mean that you are. God is, after all, at least a verb. She is neither Pharaoh's rod nor Moses' staff. We must be the ones to cease our slavery. She is not interested in blame, neither does she offer praise. Truth, gratitude are ours to breathe. She will not have your answers. She is too large for answers. She dances too wildly to be fastened to them, and answers are nouns anyway. God is at least a verb, twirling in the radiant reds of spring blossoms, singing in the rare silences between rapid opinions, attending the tears of dark-skinned deaths, learning in tiny alabaster smiles. God is waiting in the space between fingers that might connect. He is waiting for us to stop naming her. She is waiting for us to see all of him. God is waiting to be unshrunk. The second reading is an excerpt from Queering Faith by Alex Capitan. There are many truths about the word queer. Queer can mean strange. Queer can be a slur. Queer can be a self-identity term in terms of sexuality or gender. Queer can be an umbrella term for non-straight sexualities. Queer can be a political framework. Queer can even be an academic discipline. Queer theory was born in the early 90s as part of queer activism, which pushed back against the growing segment of privileged gay and lesbian people arguing they were just as normal as straight people. Queer theory is rooted in post-structuralism, which teaches that there is no such thing as a single, universal, absolute truth, that there are always multiple, even contradictory, equally true interpretations and meanings of something. Queer theory does not put stock in a static and immutable truth about who a person is, based on the idea that they were born that way, that their gender, sexuality, race, or any number of other things about them was hardwired into them. Instead, it emphasizes the choices we make. To me, Unitarian Universalism is a queer faith. At the core of Unitarian Universalism is the idea that my truth and your truth can both be true, even if they contradict each other. This is the most powerful theology I can imagine. Some UUs worship the natural world. Some believe in reincarnation. Some speak to the ancestors. Some believe in the scientific method. Some follow Jesus or Muhammad or Gandhi. Some believe in a single God. Some believe in many gods. And some believe in no God. And this is our greatest uniqueness and our greatest strength. However, in order to tap into our superpower as a religion, we can't just coexist without meaningfully engaging with each other's truths. Queering faith means turning social conventions upside down. It means actively talking about our different beliefs, deeply sharing our practices that make each of us feel connected and grounded, and experiencing joy and wonder in how different they are.
Near, far. Near, far. You get the idea. You remember this? Many years ago, a minister did this as one of the readings on a Sunday morning in church where I was. I was still fresh from my Lutheran upbringing, and I was kind of confused and intrigued that Sesame Street could be a Sunday morning reading. Really? Wow. Near, far. What I loved about it is it brought about this reality that we're often asked to choose, that it's either or. You're either near or you're far. This idea of choice that starts so early in life on Sesame Street and beyond. It also starts early every day of how we're going to spend our time or schedule, what we have to choose between or what we can't choose between. This idea of choice, starting early in life and the day, leads to cascading questions and choices throughout life. Moving from simple things like breakfast, which is often good to say yes to both things. Do you want this or this? Yes, is normally the best answer. And it goes into larger things around activities or classes, what you can choose between. Choices of what to learn about or participate in. Choices of what communities to be in relationship with or not. Even friends and family to be in relationship with or not. Choice in varying degrees about what we can and can't choose because of limitations in our life context or in society itself that are placed on us. for how to choose or not be able to choose. And in these days of isolation, of pandemic times, I'm reminded so often of the reality of both and. It's so much more often both and rather than either or. How many times these days have you felt both far and near at the same time? Like a pinball between hope and despair, celebrating vaccines, waiting for vaccines, zooming with loved ones, feeling connected, but waiting to be with them. Waiting in these in-between times where so little is clear-cut, either or. It's almost always both and. I feel both near and far at the same time from where we've been and where we're going, both near and far all the time. Too often our society has perpetuated binary thinking, either or, in believing, in acting, either near or far, nowhere in between, about our assumptions around gender or around race, around class or ability, religion, spirituality. There is so often an assumption made that religion and theology and spirituality are the opposite or even the enemy of full inclusion and acceptance, the broad, beautiful spectrum of humanity in all its forms. Whenever I hear this, or when I used to think of it years ago, I'm reminded of something that I learned in a Hebrew class in college, which is the plurality, the diversity, the multiplicity that is in the very foundations of the creation story of Genesis. Language is important and fascinating, and the deeper you delve into it, the more it reveals about the world. So in the beginning, that famous scripture passage from Genesis is not actually in the beginning, it's in a beginning. The Hebrew word in that famous passage is plural. It's in a, one of many beginnings, opening up the poetry and metaphor of not only that story, but this foundational story, to speak of multiple beginnings and open up the possibility of galaxies swirling in and a big bang of beginnings, expansive and wide open. And likewise, just a few verses later in that foundational text, another plurality exists when humanity is created. Out of the dust and the earth, humans are created by God, of course, but the Hebrew word used for God there is one of many that's used throughout Scripture. But in that story, it's Elohim, which is the plural form of the holy, the image of God. Humanity being made in God's image, Imagio Dei, is translated rightly that humanity is made in our image. The idea that the divine reality is not this one singular, clear thing, as Trish read to us from Dr. Rideout, but our, multiple, many. A God, a goddess, a divine, holy entity of many names and beyond all naming. When I learned this in my religious studies, it kind of freaked me out. I started getting caught in this tangle of questions about monotheism and polytheism and the whole one God thing. But it led me down a path of exploration of scripture and religion, rooted in some of the oldest teachings and words and stories that things aren't so simple and clear-cut. Instead of dwelling in the possibilities of a wide open and broad understanding of the divine, that the image of the holy can and in fact does outstretch our imagining. For millennia, idols have been placed in that spot. Idols being the things we worship, give our attention to, that we idolize, that makes us move into questions where we don't question things. These unquestioned norms in our world, this either-or thinking, has replaced over and over those multiplicities and those possibilities that were wide open. As Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout writes, God is no noun. God is at least a verb, and even that shrinks her. God is waiting in the space between those fingers that might connect He is waiting for us to stop naming her. She is waiting for us to see all of him. God is waiting to be unshrunk. What I love about that poem is its expansive understanding, breaking open these conventional ideas of what God is or isn't, existing or non-existing, or how it exists. And that is core to most religious traditions, even those we as Unitarian Universalists might think as conventional or closed-minded. Every tradition, somewhere in their scriptures or narratives or stories, has space for complexity, with stories and words, interpretations. It's why every year when I was a youth minister in St. Paul at Unity Church, our youth had Our Whole Lives class, which you may be familiar with. It's a class about relationships and sexuality and gender, and we would often have a panel of people from different identities and backgrounds to speak about their experiences of gender and relationship and sexuality. We'd have a Lutheran or a Presbyterian or Jewish or Muslim religious person there whose traditions our Unitarian Universalist youth assumed were unsalvageably conventional and closed. But those leaders were on our panel because they were gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. Because at its best, every religion has space for multiplicity and complexity. Every religion has at its core limitless mystery and wonder and awe that draws us beyond those narrow definitions or those narrow assumptions. Sometimes those get lost or covered, that possibility and complexity, by centuries and teachings of doctrine and dogma. They're like little bumpers on a bowling lane that kind of keep you in your life path. Those structures that place you in a certain way, a way you're meant to keep in line of who you are, who you love, how you identify. But if we're lucky, we find enough spaces where the bumpers are taken away that are safe and joyful and celebratory, to know that such multiplicity and complexity is a gift. And our lives and humanity and the world are better for it. This shows up in really simple ways sometimes, like how we refer to each other. Sometimes we can slip into those easy thoughts of choice of either or, the simplistic language where there are clear grammarian rules, norms that must be followed. And I kindly suggest to all of us, speaking to myself, that so many rules, for the sake of the flourishing of humanity, should and can be redone, re-examined, opened up, sometimes abolished, but at least flexible. And there are some easy ways to do this. So a friend recently shared with me, so think about when someone leaves something somewhere, like a cell phone or whatever it is, we already, without a second thought, have language to hold that person's identity without gender certitude. We say, whose is this? They left it here. I wonder when they'll come back for it. We use they, them pronouns for an individual person without specifying gender. It can start with simple things like that, or stating your own pronouns when you introduce yourself, to normalize that practice, especially in church groups where we sometimes don't think about doing that. Using more general language that doesn't perpetuate binaries or either or framing, moving beyond the only options of inclusion being men and women, or boys and girls, or brothers and sisters, all of those binary constructs, but instead using language that is quite common, like folks, friends, y'all, everyone, children, or simply people. Working on an inclusive heart and inclusive communities means acknowledging when you make a mistake, maybe with someone's pronouns, and much of the time, like anything, it simply takes a little practice, a little humility, a little openness to learning more, paying better attention. Those are pretty much basically the building blocks of any good, ethical, thoughtful way of living. It takes constant practice to be open and humble, and to practice being who you want to be And from those simple practices, there are larger ones about not focusing on people's gender as their main identifier, or not asking invasive questions about people's gender expression or identity, especially if they're trans or genderqueer or non-binary, as if we would normally not ask anybody about that. Not assuming we know another person's story or experience, not assuming we need to know all the details about people's identity other than what they're willing and wanting to share. We can navigate our shared spaces better if we just commit to those basic principles as a community, of learning about things that we don't know, engaging things we're unsure about, acknowledging harm we've done intentionally or not, honoring each other's identity, letting each other lead in what they want to discuss or not, creating space for each other, especially those on the margins of our binary society, and supporting things that are simple, like gender-neutral restrooms, and supporting larger things like legislation protecting transgender people in school, in workplaces, in healthcare, and beyond. Mindfully paying attention to the experience of another, where gender fluidity and openness is celebrated and accepted, that's a place to start. As Alex Capitan, a trans UU community minister and one of the leaders of the Transforming Heart Collective class we're engaging with this coming month, wrote in today's reading, Alex wrote, "At the core of Unitarian Universalism is the idea that my truth and your truth can both be true, even if they contradict each other. This is the most powerful theology I can imagine," they write. This is a profound invitation to understand that multiple truths can exist. Now, to be clear, not every truth, like we explored recently, can coincide, but multiple truths can. Multiple things can be true at the same time about who we are, about how we experience the world, or an expansive understanding of identity and spirituality. A little practice, a little humility, a little openness to learning more and paying attention to each other, giving each other grace when we mess up, while at the same time accepting and expecting that we have the ability to learn, to grow, and to change, and to wonder. When we think we are being nearly as inclusive as we can be, perhaps we have further to go. Because at our core, this faith is one that allows for room. It's a big tent religion at its core, a big heart and an open mind, where we're still striving to be who we yet can be. Ours is a faith that knows there's always more to know, always more to learn, always more to imagine, more beliefs, more wisdom, more love, somewhere beyond what we thought was the limit. There's something more that maybe we had never imagined before. A little practice, a little humility, the belief that we can and always will be learning and growing. That's where love calls us every day. Amen.